Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show, joined by Jim Lee and Deb Hartley, Prudential Utah Real Estate. Hello, my friends. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you, Joe.
All right.
Thank you. That was almost coordinated.
That was good.
Yes. The rehearsal worked.
Right. Well, welcome to the show, guys. I'm excited to have you here because at the first of the year, I think it's a really good time. And I know that's, I'm sure for a lot of people, time to start thinking about, hey, do I want to make a change? Do I want to maybe, purchase a second home, sell my first home, buy a new home? There's a lot of that starts to happen right around that time.
Do I want to make Park City a base of some sort?
Exactly.
Sure, those goals, those annual goals.
Yeah, it goes right along with.
Are we going to make any big changes this year?
Yeah, I think it goes right along with the top, the top two things. People, they want to lose weight, they want to save money, and they want to get organized. And then all of a sudden, it's right there with it. Oh, maybe I should change the house.
Exactly.
So the one thing that we do know is the inventory is a lot less.
It's slim out there.
Yeah.
It's slim in this time of year with so many people in town. If you want to get into C property, it's very difficult because people don't want to be interrupted during their vacation stays. So
Good point.
Very little to see.
Well, the other thing that I think is interesting about this too is that it's a seller's market in that you can, because there's not a lot of inventory, you can kind of go for a pretty high price, I think. But the other part of this too, if I understand it correctly, is that because there is not as many offers, it kind of leans a little towards the buyer too. So there's sort of a give and take there that I think is a little interesting.
That's what you kind of call a balanced market.
Exactly.
A balanced market.
That's why I think where we are right now in today's real estate world is particularly in Park City. Real estate is regional, but in Park City, it's a balanced market right now.
That's pretty cool. That's good for everybody.
It is.
It is.
It's a win-win.
Excellent. Well, tell me, as we start looking at that, a big part of that is how to price that home, and that comes from your appraisal, typically, right? So tell me about real estate appraisals.
Well, first of all, as realtors, we are not appraisers.
Right.
So we hire an independent, neutral third party to do the appraisal.
Why is it important to do? Why would you suggest getting an appraisal?
Well,
first place? You have to have one, right?
Right. Well, if you're making a purchase and you're getting a loan, you have to have one because the bank will demand that that's there, so that they know that they're making a wise investment in you.
Makes sense, right?
Okay.
So not only does the borrower have to qualify, the home as well has to qualify.
I see.
So a lender typically only loans on 80% of the value of the appraisal.
Okay.
So appraisals are very, very important. They're done by an independent third party, people who are certified to be appraisers.
And this certification is immense. I had a friend who was one. They not only do they have to go through the process of all the classes and all of that stuff, and the certification, but they actually have to go out and do a huge number of appraisals as almost an intern,
it's an
basically.
intern. It's almost like a 2-year internship.
Right. It's 2 years of doing it basically for free. Unbelievable amount of time they put into that.
It's intense.
They try and make it more of a science than a target that you throw darts at and say, well, it looks like about this. They provide methods in which to evaluate by comparing it with other properties.
Yeah.
Typically.
That have sold. Not that are listed. So that's
we call those comps.
We call those comparable sales. So typically, we've had buyers or sellers say to us, well, that house is listed for X amount of dollars. Well, it doesn't really matter what it's listed for. It matters what it sells for.
Right.
So the sales price is really, even under contracts don't matter.
Well, and a lot of people have the mistaken idea that if they've got a big home in their neighborhood that sells, and it sells for a lot of money, that their home, which maybe isn't the smallest but isn't the largest, is going to sell for a comparable value. And that's the point. It probably isn't, because it's not comparable, right?
It's not comparable, and that's where the appraiser comes in. They adjust for number of beds, number of baths. They adjust for condition. They adjust for views. They adjust for lot. I mean, there's a lot of adjustments. So just because one home sells for $600,000, that doesn't mean the house 2 doors up the block will sell for, or 2 doors up will sell for $600,000.
Well, and this is where a person who's trying to sell on their own can get into a lot of trouble, as I understand it.
That's
because they do not have the ability to go and pull comps on their own. You have to involve a realtor to do that. That's where realtors
or
become
an appraiser,
important.
or
An
that
appraiser.
independent third party appraiser.
Right. So if they're not willing to do that, if they're thinking, hey, I'm going to sell this house on my own, I don't need an appraiser, I don't need a realtor, you're going to have a real hard time, because you probably don't know how much your home is realistically worth.
Exactly. So
and you're not going to be able to do it without
they're
involving
throwing
them.
the dart at the board.
And you're always biased. Well, mine's mine's got.
Right?
You know, right? Mine's better than
Mine's got
the one
new
that just
hinges
sold.
on the door.
It's always
Exactly.
better.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's never worse. Let's put it that way.
So, of course, we know that the buyer has to have one, but when we talk about the seller, it's a benefit for them to consider this idea. It doesn't cost a tremendous amount of money, and based on the fact that they're now going to have a better ability to negotiate a price, it's probably much better for them.
So typically as realtors, we're pretty good about, in fact, we're excellent at coming up with what we think is a market value of a property.
We give more of an opinion.
Right.
Of course.
You know.
But based upon the comparable sales.
Right.
And you guys have done it enough that's another part of it. I mean, I think of where I live, often they call them magic lines,
Right.
where there's you go this far east, it's worth this much more.
Exactly.
If you go this far south, it's worth this much more. There's some interesting things there that you would not know as a seller typically that a realtor would.
Right.
Exactly. What values are typical of that neighborhood? That line is what you're indicating.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. The
It's always
line.
kind of funny, I think.
Right.
But this is this is really where having a professional makes so much more sense, because at the end of the day, you're likely to take a much bigger percentage on that sale than if you didn't involve somebody.
Well, it would more likely be a more successful sale. So if a seller is, they think their value is here and we think their value is here, we will suggest for them to get an independent appraisal. That even helps us. So when we go to market the house, we can say, gee, we have an appraisal that's a month old that shows this value. So we can quantify it.
Exactly, and why I say this is always so important is, as I understand it, one of the biggest rules of selling homes in the first place is there is a very short margin of time at the beginning where you need to sell that home if you want to get that price, and if you don't, that's not going to come back. You're not going to get there again.
Right. So it's usually the first 30 days is
Right.
where you get your most activity. Anything after that, everything starts to become stale, old. We've seen it, been there, done that.
Yeah.
You've lost your punch.
Yeah, even if you go as far as taking it off the market and putting it back in 6 months later, people remember it's been there before. I remember
remembering.
this one.
Forget remembering. Our MLS system tracks history of properties that have sold from the beginning of time. So we can see where it originally listed and where it's dropped or where it's increased. So, and what it originally sold for. So it's not just take it off the market and reset the clock.
And when we're talking about valuing a property, we're talking at the value at a specific moment in time.
Good point.
Because you can only go back a certain distance in the past to use comparable sales. We don't go back 3 years. We go back typically 6 months.
I know people would like to. There's people who are like, I want to go back about 2008 would be really great.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
That would be
exactly.
nice. But that's not going to happen. Well, this is such an important part of it. How do people get to an appraiser? I assume that the best way is to go through a realtor.
Well, first of all, if they're refinancing, their bank hires the appraiser.
Right.
We do not provide the appraisal. The bank goes through a clearinghouse to find a local appraiser. We like to use Park City appraisers, somebody that's licensed in Park City and a member of the Park City Board, so they have access to Park City information.
Right.
Somebody from South Jordan does not know Park City information.
Definitely.
So that's the first rule.
Okay.
Use a Park City realtor.
And also, Joe, that the local appraiser knows those boundary lines, those neighborhoods, those different values.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to refinance or buy, your lender will provide the appraiser. If you're just looking for, if you're looking for a statement of value based upon the comparable sales, whether it's a death in the family, a tax planning, something like that, contact one of us, contact a realtor, and they will definitely give you a great appraisal name.
Is it also not a good idea if you're looking to take out some kind of a loan against your...
A HELOC.
Yeah.
Home equity line of credit.
Right.
That's right.
Then you definitely would probably want to involve an appraiser there as well.
Your lender will help you with that.
And I'll tell you, a classic is somebody may call up and say, can you give me an appraiser? I need a really high value. Okay. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
You know, it is
We all would
what
like
it
that.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and for some purposes, maybe they would like a lower value.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. The appraiser is bound because when an appraiser submits an appraisal, they could always be called on the carpet. They can always be called back and questioned, and they picture themselves sitting in front of the judge, rationalizing how they came up with a certain number.
One of my friends who is an appraiser, I asked him to appraise my home and he recused himself. I can't do it.
Exactly.
I know
That's
you. I'm sorry. I can't
That's
do your
right.
house.
Right. And typically, All appraisers are licensed by the state of Utah and fall under the Division of Real Estate, which is governed by the Attorney General's office.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not just willy-nilly.
We're not playing around.
We're not messing around. Nope.
And we're not messing around with Prudential Utah Real Estate. Jim Lee, Deb Hartley, thank you so much
Thank
as
you
always
so
for being
much,
here.
Jeff.
We've thrown up
Always
the website
good.
address right there. It is.
Happy New Year.
Thank you guys.
Yes,
Happy
Happy
New Year.
New Year.
Let's make it a good one, huh?
All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
We'll see you next month.
Well, we will be back here in just a moment to wrap up the show after this.